Random thoughts. In this video, I'm going to read part of C.W. Hobley's book, Bantu Magic and Belief. And in this part, he talks about the status of the education of the natives and how the missionaries groups or the missions, the Christian missions, were not really helping. And I found this to be interesting because the general understanding is that the missions played a critical role, the Christian missions and missionaries played a critical role in educating the natives, building schools. Of course, most of the well-known schools even today, they are schools that were established by the Christian missionaries or missions. Now, in this part, Hobley kind of like is not persuaded that the missionaries were doing a good job when it came to the education of the native populations. And this is what he says. The missions all claim to play a great part in the education of the natives, and the local government has, through paucity of funds, found it convenient to acquiesce in this claim and to a great extent leaves native education to missions effort. The results leave much to be desired, and naturally the primary mission's ideal of education is to impart to the native sufficient knowledge of reading and writing to enable him to read such portions of the scriptures as have been translated into the vernacular of the tribe. So he says, even the government, the colonial government, at some point decided that maybe it was a good idea to just leave that part of educating the natives to the missions. They can do that part. But Hobley personally seems like he was not convinced that the missionaries were doing a good job because they had interest, they had priorities, and the priorities of the missionaries was not to educate the natives to or give them knowledge that will enable them to do other things besides just knowledge to read the scriptures. That was their primary goal, that we are going to teach these people so that they are able to read the scriptures. Beyond that, they were not really interested. He continued to say, very few missionaries understand the philosophy of education. Very few even have much knowledge of education method. As a brilliant educationalist has written, the function of education is to foster growth. The aim of the teacher should be the development of the latent powers of his pupils, the unfolding of the latent life. So he says that missionaries did not even understand what they were doing or what was the point of education. They were just doing it as part of evangelizing, which I think is I see how that was. I see how that was what was happening. That the missionaries, of course, their primary goal was to spread the word and to convert and to baptize and to mission, of course, to do missionary work. It wasn't their primary goal that, oh, we are going to make these people skilled labor or give them the capacity for them to think a lot more logically and maybe become more creative or invent stuff. That was not their goal. He continues to say, are the blacks in Kenya colony receiving an education of this nature? The answer is, it is feared generally in the negative. Now, the character of the education of the black is going to have a profound effect on his future and also on the relations of black and white. This is truism, and as Dudley Kidd has so forcibly put it, the problem is the progress of backward race, and we allow the inefficient teachers whose only qualification for the difficult work is their own kind of hearts to form the character of the rising generation and to complicate our difficulties. Has any state the right to allow unqualified people to intensify national problems in this gratuitous fashion? This shows that there was a conflict between the goals of the colonialists and the goals of the missionaries. Of course, as I've said, the missionaries' primary goal was to convert, to evangelize and convert and baptize. But the colonialists' goal was, of course, to, of course, manage the population in a certain way and also, of course, make that population a lot more productive for their own benefit, for the benefit of the colonialists. He continued to say, it is not to be inferred that missionary education effort is mischievous, far from it, but it is narrow in its outlook. It is not based on any sound foundation, and it does very little to develop latent powers. Those are his complaints against the missionary education. He says that the colonies do not, as a rule, favor literary education, but clamor mainly for industrial education. Now, this is where it shows how the two sides had very different goals. While the missionaries were looking for, of course, to convert and baptize, the colonists, and mostly here maybe he's talking about the colonial officers and the settlers, the farmers, and the business people, their interest was about industrial education. He continues to say there is no germ of truth in this opinion, but a sense of proportion must be exercised, or the industrial market may be flooded with artisans of mediocre efficiency far in excess of the demand. The great role of the African in the future must be, as it has been in the past, the cultivation of the soil. So he says maybe the education should, for him personally, he kind of like removes himself from the position of the colonist, and for him he thinks that the Africans should be given just education to continue doing what he has always done, cultivate the land, improve his agricultural methods, and teach him to extract more food per acre to feed the future increase of the native population and still have something to sell. So he says the primary focus, that's his also his personal opinions, that the primary focus of the education should be to enable the Africans to do a lot more agriculture so that he can feed himself and, of course, the growing population. There is another part in this book where he talks about the dangers of enabling the Africans to be a lot more productive than it is necessary. And he says that investing in making the African to be very productive had to stop at a certain place, because if the British colonial government did it too much and the Africans produced more than they could consume, then that was not going to benefit them. He says that was going to benefit the Asian trader middle person, because there were a lot of Indians who are doing business with the locals. And he thought that the most benefit of the production that the African was going to do was going to go to the Indian. And he did not like that, even though he was at the same time making arguments about enabling the white settlers to get more labor, cheap labor. So for him, what benefits the British was okay, but if it is going to benefit Indians, for example, was going to be problematic. Those are my random thoughts.